feel like I wasn't spinning my wheels and like going in the wrong direction. Something that I wanted to, level up myself, and not just, come to some mediocre solution to the logo. It's like I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything that I could to really hit it out of the park.
Hello all, this is Davis with Fyresite and welcome to our new interview series. Today I spent an hour sitting down with Eric Daly, Fyresite's in-house web designer. We discussed Eric's very unconventional introduction to the Fyresite team, his introduction and experience working in Figma, as well as all the amazing work that went into rebranding Fyresite into the brand we all know today. And with that, here's my interview with Eric Daly. Tell me a bit about yourself and how you got involved with Fyresite. I know it's a very interesting story.
Yeah, so I think that I'll do the safe for work version where I kind of started going to events in downtown Phoenix. I had just moved there, so I wasn't really tuned in. I didn't have too many friends down there. I went to a show by myself at the Marquee Theater and ran into a buddy of mine there. He invited me to hang out with some of his coworkers, which ended up being Sean at Fyresite and Paul and some other guys. So it was kind of like I met them before I knew anything about the company. Hung out with them after the show, crashed on the couch the night after, and just kind of woke up in a hungover, kind of daze, and walked into, one of the bedrooms to say goodbye to anyone who was there. And I think I saw Jason working in the office. He was just kind of there by himself, and I was just like, oh, I didn't know you guys worked out of this house. Like, that's pretty cool. And he kind of gave me the rundown on what Fyresite was. And I was like, yeah, that's pretty awesome that you guys are able to, run a whole business just out of your back room. So that was my first introduction. It wasn't until a little while later at another party I met another employee who kind of introduced me to, like, oh, you should come work for us. Like, you're a designer. Like, we could use someone like you. And that kind of gave me the courage to jump in there and give them my portfolio. I think I had like a little interview after that, and it kind of felt like the right time. We kind of like made that connection that we hung out at each other that one time. So from then it was pretty much fate after that. So probably, I think, I don't know how many, it was a couple of months that went by from the interview to actually getting in the door. I had to kind of keep on bugging them to get me on the schedule. But once it happened, it just kind of clicked, and I've been there for almost 9 years now. It's pretty crazy. I've never worked a job that long in my life.
I know. I hear you with that. Yeah, I also had a kind of similar story in meeting Jason just sort of haphazardly at like a entrepreneur conference, like the State 48 Entrepreneur Conference that they have around here. And like, it's just, things just kind of work out. And, like you said, it took like a month or two to finally get in here. So kind of got a similar story in terms of that. But yeah, working here is fun. Everyone at Fyresite has like some sort of involvement in the party scene here. And so it's kind of fun to see how everyone's gotten involved.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun culture, and it's really cool to see how a company can work hard and get things done, but also make time for that other part of life. So you're not like investing your whole life into like only working really hard and not ever having fun or socializing, meeting people. Like, that's what life's all about. So I've always kind of valued that about Fyresite is they value your free time, and they give you like the balance that you need to live your life outside of work.
Yeah, so it is a fun community here. Love to have a good time. But for you were working as our in-house graphic designer. You kind of handle the whole brand image of Fyresite. You do a lot of the web design concepts. You work a lot in Figma. You use a bit of Photoshop, Illustrator, all that stuff. You're a wizard. I want to say that. Like, genuinely, I think you're like got like one of the top like visions for creative design here. So kind of like, what is your position now? And what do you kind of do with Fyresite? How what's your position here?
Yeah, so my position right now as senior designer, technically, which is a kind of a catch-all term, I think, for a lot of the work that I do. It's like I do some, UX design, UI design, a little bit of web design. Every once in a while, I'll do branding. I'll do logos. Marketing, graphics. It kind of goes, all across the board of, my responsibilities here. But I think when I first started, my first role was kind of in the front end development for WordPress themed websites, which was kind of like the lower dollar amount sites that we were doing at the time. It was kind of just like I had no web experience whatsoever. I just kind of jumped into this job with only doing some graphic design, my freelance business. So that was kind of a moment for me to kind of wake up and be like, okay, I can actually do this. I can wrap my head around some of these concepts a little better now. So as time kind of went on, I went from being the person who was kind of putting these WordPress sites together to, I guess, more just steering the design of the ship in general. So designing out the website and kind of having that back and forth with the client to kind of figure out what the end result is going to be, and then passing it off to the developers so that they can kind of figure out the nitty gritty of how it's all going to work. And then, I'll kind of work with the developers too to kind of cancel out or solve any problems that come up along the way. But that's my position in a nutshell, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what's the process look like, or what kind of tools do you use when you're working on graphic design? What does that look like handing it off to developers?
Yeah, so when we start working with the client, obviously we do a lot of, groundwork, just kind of figuring out what their business is all about. We do, kind of a discovery session where we figure out like what's important to them. We kind of get all those thoughts down on a paper and to a document, have kind of a, depending on the client, sometimes we'll do like a mood board and, get a lot of visual cues and bring them into an organized place where they can kind of, get all the ideas out there in front of us, and we can kind of start making some decisions on what the project is going to look like. I think from there, we'll start kind of a wireframe version of the website, which is just, bare bones, what the structure is going to look like, taking the basic building blocks of everything and piece it together, how it's going to function. So that's kind of a key part when we get the feedback from the client, what that is going to look like, if they like it, if they don't like it. We're not sinking too much time and effort into that first stage. Once we get sign off on that, we'll jump into a full high fidelity design, which will be more like, this is what the website's actually going to look like. Then we can kind of present that to the client and get those, thoughts from them about if the colors are wrong, if the fonts can be different, then, get those things figured out. Once that's approved, then we'll go to development. So we're not wasting the developers' time, bringing them in early. Then, passing off the design file to the developer is kind of the last step. If there's any questions or, things that they don't understand about the design, we can kind of work through that together. And then we QA it together so that we can kind of compare what they developed to the actual design. And, maybe there's some things that were overlooked. And that's kind of like when we get to fix any of that stuff before we get the client to do their final QA. And that's, once they approve that, that's the whole process. We get paid, everyone's happy.
And so that whole process, that's a great rundown of it. I appreciate you for breaking that down. For you, one of the big tools you use that we use at Fyresite is Figma. It's where a lot of the designing happens. And I know that there's been a few different tools we've used in the past to kind of learn that Figma is probably the best for us. But what was kind of like the history of Fyresite's tools, like leading up to using Figma? I know that there were a few there was Adobe XD,
Yeah.
there was Sketch. Like
Yeah.
what was what did that history look like?
Totally. I think the beginning I mean, when I first started at Fyresite, we were still working out of Photoshop files. It was very, clunky, but I think that's kind of just what we did back then. It was, just get it done and then run with it. So we were very quick and dirty back then. I think we got kind of invested into Sketch pretty heavily after that, and it was kind of like the next big step in being able to kind of like, standardize the process, get everybody on the same page as far as, the best practices for how to design something so that we could all kind of, agree on certain things that needed to be done a certain way. Sketch really let us kind of hone in those things, being able to work with components and being more strict with the way that things are built out. That also helps the developers because they can kind of break down the design a little bit easier. So working with Sketch for a little while. Adobe XD also came out. We kind of experimented with that for a little bit. Yeah. We went to an Adobe XD event and got to participate and do a little app showdown where me and another designer built out a concept using Adobe XD, and we actually won the Viewer's Choice Award or the People's Choice Award. So that was cool to get to use Adobe in this new way because before that Adobe wasn't really in that space for making a screen design software. So that was kind of like the first step for them. And Adobe XD was it was a lot more simple back then, but there was kind of like some things I didn't like about it, but I mean it was pretty good. I think later down the line they started to incorporate some animation stuff, which was really cool, but now Adobe XD just doesn't exist anymore. They pulled the plug on it, so I think that just kind of was the end of it. So I think I'm trying to remember like what the catalyst was for us switching to Figma. I think it was just we saw all these features that were included in Figma that really stood out against what was available with Sketch. I think with Sketch it was kind of like they have a bunch of these updates, but then nothing's really changing. Figma seemed like they were coming out with new features all the time. One thing for sure was being able to learn auto layout and just how much time you can save in building out a website by being able to design it more in a way that the website is actually developed, which I think that was kind of missing from Sketch. So a lot of the being able to work with divs and arranging things in a column was way easier.
Yeah,
another thing that. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
No, I was just saying that. I was just agreeing with you that's been like a big debate between Figma and Sketch is just like what's the functionality and what's like kind of the upgrade process. And I know that's one of the big reasons that we've been using Figma is just like the ability to collaborate and the ability to translate to the developer side of things.
Yeah, passing off design files had never been easier. With Sketch, it was a little bit more of a convoluted process where it's like, okay, you have the Sketch file, it's done. How do you present the Sketch file to the client? You can't really present it with Sketch because that's a design software. So that's one thing that Figma really knocked out of the park is it's like, we're going to be the design software, but also you can pitch with Figma. So that's like, game changer. Before you needed to have like a third party app like InVision, so we would design something in Sketch, bring it over to InVision, use the InVision document to present to the client, get the client's feedback in InVision, and then interpret that InVision content, move it back into the Sketch, make another version of the Sketch. So it was always back and forth, uploading, and it was just kind of a nightmare. So being able to have all of that within Figma is a huge, huge benefit, and time saving.
Yeah, and you mentioned the apps that you had to use, or like the third-party apps you had to use for Sketch. And I know you don't use a whole lot of plugins for Figma, but what are a few of those plugins you use?
Yeah, Figma's great because there's a huge community of plugin developers that make features that they work just as well as Figma features. So there's definitely some like flexibility in what it can do with some of the new stuff that's coming out. A plugin that I use all the time is I think it's a WCAG color contrast checker. So that's basically letting you check your colors against each other for the accessibility standards. So people that have like maybe vision disabilities, you want to make sure that your website is according to the standards. So I mean, you can actually get in trouble for making a website that's not accessible. Unsplash is another huge plugin that I use. It's just so easy to grab some stock photos on a website that you're working on. Maybe you just need a quick image or an icon. There's icon plugins. There's a new plugin that's like not something that I've used, but I see it like being used a lot, and it's called Reloom. It's kind of a platform that kind of got really popular with Webflow developers. So they actually released a Figma plugin, and it kind of bridges the gap between designing in Figma and developing in Webflow, which is like a web like code-free based web development software. So you can actually design something in Figma and take it directly to a website, which almost takes all the guesswork out of coding altogether, which is a pretty crazy thing for the technology nowadays. It's just getting easier and easier for people to be able to create without really knowing a lot about code.
Yeah, 100%. Me being a non-coder, I definitely appreciate all the no-code software out there right now.
Same.
You know what I mean? It's a challenge, and that's why people hire out companies like Fyresite. They hire out other like businesses just to manage their website, is because of all the like complexities that happen behind the scenes with all the coding, and there's just like a lot of questions behind it. And I know even working here, I personally struggle to comprehend HTML, CSS, all that stuff. So yeah, working with Figma is great.
Definitely.
We're Webflow too, I know, is a big one. But yeah, you mentioned you say Flutterflow. Is that with the stock image website you said? Or
Sorry, you cut out a little bit. I didn't hear what you said there.
what was the stock image plugin you mentioned?
It's called Unsplash.
Unsplash, right?
So it's a website that does stock photography already, but they have a plugin as well for Figma. So you can just type in a search right into Figma and plop the image right in without having to go to the browser or anything. So that anything to kind of prevent you from going back and forth is a huge help for me, because once you get in the zone, last thing you want to do is kind of like jump out of the document and then find your place again.
Yeah, 100%. And so
I think that
go ahead.
another huge thing, aside from the plugins, is like the community of Figma. There's a huge marketplace of tools and resources that you can download for free. Some of them are paid, but like say that you need an example of a wireframe for an app. You're working on something that you haven't worked on before. You can usually find an example or something that's close in the Figma community, which has been a big lifesaver for me sometimes when I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of getting into that territory where I'm doing something that I haven't done before. Maybe I'm not as comfortable with, but you can kind of see what other people using Figma have done. And it's kind of inspiring, kind of like having all that stuff in one place. You don't even have to leave the Figma app to see that stuff. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and another tool that's out there that we use that is under it's under high debate about like whether true designers should use it or not, is Canva, which I use a ton, and I know that we use a ton just for like a lot of its functionality. What do you think of designers using Canva, and what kind of advice would you give to people in terms of using it?
Oh man, yeah, Canva's great. I used to, hate on Canva a lot back in the day, and I kind of thought that it was beneath me to use something like Canva, so that was
Me
kind of
too.
just like my ego. But once I kind of dove into it more, it's like it's one of those things that I maybe never would have tried it if it wasn't for working at Fyresite, but we had an account, so it was like, okay, like I'll give it a shot. And the more that I kind of dive into the features, you really have a lot of control over what's going in there. There's a lot of great resources that you can work with, and even for teams, there's a lot of features that you can kind of develop a brand guideline for your teammates to kind of work with. So when we were working with the rebrand of Fyresite, it was kind of like a opportunity to take all of the elements from the brand package and present them in a way where it was like, okay, someone who's not a designer can go in here and maybe make a social image or something that's normally something that would get put on my plate. Now I can kind of pass that responsibility onto someone and still feel like it's going to get done in the right way.
Yeah, 100%. So you mentioned a bit about the Fireside branding. We've already talked a bit about it, but this was like a huge project for you. You had a whole brand guideline you had to come up with. How long did it take you to go from let's rebrand to we are launching our rebrand? How long? Do you know how long that was?
Oh man, it was a while because we actually went through the whole process of doing a rebrand. It's always kind of like a lengthy process, but I think the idea that we needed a new logo was a very old idea, and there would always be talks about it at the office, and it was like, yeah, we should get a new logo, and it's like, yeah, we should come up with one. It's like, all right, well, who's gonna do it? And it kind of just got bounced around forever, until I think it was a kind of an opportunity to I think the opportunity to work on it came up when there was kind of like a lag in some of the client work, so it was like I had some availability to maybe put some effort into it. Some of the other designers also put concepts on the board, and we all kind of collaborated on it, and it was a chance to kind of reevaluate what Fireside meant and ask questions about like what do we even want Firesite to represent. So that was kind of a really cool exercise to because I've worked with a lot of clients in the past about doing redesign and development, or worked with people in the past doing branding and logos. It's nothing new for me, but never have I done a project that was like this close to me. And being a part of the company, that's it was a very like kind of a jarring thing to not only do I have to think about like this business, but it's like what are my coworkers going to think about it? How is this going to be received by my boss? It's like it was such an intense new like probably one of the biggest things that I've ever had to design for my career. Putting all of that on the line to come up with something really great. But I think that pressure really pushed me to try harder on this than I ever had with anything. So that was kind of like a good moment for me to I just really focus and get some something fresh, something good out there.
Yeah, totally. So I see that you have the brand guidelines up right now. So I think this would be a great opportunity to just look over them, and then you can kind of walk us through what the whole brand guidelines are and what it means to you.
Yeah, for sure. So the huge thing with the redesign was, we wanted it to be a little bit more grown up. Our old logo, I'm sure you've seen it. It's a little cartoony. It's a little cookie cutter. If you search Fireball on Google Images, it's one of the first things that you'll see on the results. Just with some text behind it, like that's our logo. So we wanted something that was really unique. We wanted something that, not only represented us now, but like would kind of like hold its weight into the future and give some momentum to Fyresite as a brand. So it's kind of like, how do we get to this new logo? And it kind of took a lot of meeting and conversations to get to that point. Asking those hard questions about what is our brand voice? Things that are kind of abstract and hard to put your finger on. So I think the brand style guide is kind of like the culmination of all that research that we did. We really got to nail down who we are, what we represent, what even is Fyresite, what's our philosophy, all of these things that people don't even really think about their business when they're starting it, but that's like sometimes you have to go back and think about those things after the fact. So I'll go in to show the actual logo here. So this was kind of like part of the brand, the redesign pitch was presenting like the final logo. Also being able to kind of explain like where it came from. We're taking kind of like the existing fireball that we had and, morphing it into something that has a little bit more of a layered meaning. So, having that kind of shape of the Wi-Fi signal, it kind of has some movement to it, and the letter F is kind of visible in there, abstract. Having that icon itself be a standalone was really important because we wanted to kind of have just a really sharp looking emblem that could kind of stand to be used in a lot of different ways. So then we had to kind of not only come up with the logo, but come up with a whole system that would support it and, give it the wings that it needed to kind of succeed in any type of situation. So like a lot of these versions have been used like for our merchandise, for our shirts, for other stickers, and I think Jay made like golf balls and stuff. It's just, now that it's kind of in a more like easily presented package, it's so much easier to kind of see the brand grow, versus before we were kind of like, we had this awkward shaped logo. We didn't really know what we could do. Like anytime that we did anything with a logo, it was like, oh man, like how are we going to make this work?
Do you have a picture of the original logo offhand?
Yeah, let me see here.
Yeah.
So yeah, this before, it was just so hard to make that logo work on anything. It's like such a top heavy, kind of like a weird angle, and just overall it felt very just kind of janky in all kinds of ways. Like the two different fonts. There was always kind of an argument on like which logo was the actual logo. Like, oh no, that's the wrong orange. It was like there was all this kind of confusion because there had been so many different versions of it. So it was just, time for something new. And now we have like a whole system. We have the colors laid out. We have like a couple of agreed upon gradients that people can use for any type of situations. We have fonts. We have kind of some like rules for fonts. We have some like additional supporting elements, some background patterns, and photography examples, just to kind of give everyone, anything that they might need to use the brand in the future. It's like we wanted to give them as much ammunition as we could so that it's like, we can all use it as a team and not feel like it's just siloed into one person to come up with something new when we need it from them.
Right. And I think you did really well with the whole rebranding. I had a question about how you formatted it. It seems like there's like a standard format for brand guidelines. I was wondering where you got that from.
I did a lot of research on brand guidelines before this. It was kind of it became an obsession of mine, honestly, as like, doing all the research I could to, come up with a brand guideline that looked like it, made sense, and it was hitting all the things that we needed it to hit without being too lengthy, or, some of these are almost like, it's almost like condescending how much shit they put in there. It's like they'll be like, I don't know if you've heard about the Pepsi rebrand guideline. It's pretty epic, but they talk about kind of like the gravitational pull of Pepsi and like all of it. You know, they just put so much jargon and stuff in there to make it seem like it's more than it is. Kind of like what I was trying to avoid. You know, it's like I wanted it to be short, sweet, but like still have that good amount of weight to it. Gosh, I downloaded. There's a really good website that has I think it's brandingstyleguides.com. So you can go on there and you can literally download all types of brand guidelines from companies from all over, like the Olympics, DocuSign.
Oh, really?
So I started just going on here and downloading any of them that I thought were cool, and I'd kind of make this giant like archive on my laptop of all the my greatest inspirations for branding, and that kind of just really influenced what the brand guideline turned into. The Future also, I don't know if you heard of the Future brand.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned them before.
They had a really great course on branding. I actually did this just in my own free time, just because I wanted to kind of feel like I wasn't spinning my wheels and like going in the wrong direction, So it was something that I wanted to, level up myself, and not just, come to some mediocre solution to the logo. It's like I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything that I could to really hit it out of the park. So this course really helped me a lot. And, there's a guideline that kind of put out as an example that really helped me, I think, as well. I think this might be it. Yeah, this is kind of a crash course, and it's full of stuff. There's literally like hundreds of more pages in theirs that I used for ours, but it's kind of just like pick what you need and use your best judgment to kind of make it work for your brand, because every brand's different. Everything is kind of it depends on what you really need and what makes sense to put in there. For a tech company like ours, might not make sense for like a coffee company. It's all depends on what people need, and every business is different.
I love that. I love how deep into it you got, and how much like you sunk into this. Like you said, you this is your biggest project probably to date. And then what was the timeline on that? How long did it take you again?
I think that we started it. I want to say it was like shortly after we moved into the new office.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember what year that was.
That would have been like 2022, right?
2022, yeah. So I think it probably took about, working on it off and on throughout like client work, about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little less than a year.
Right. That's a pretty fast timeline.
I think when it came down to actually rolling it out and like using it, it was probably about a year from when we started just like initial thoughts and like having those meetings about it, getting the intention that we're actually going to do this, type of conversations.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job. It really reflects the brand image, I feel like. And it was all done on Figma, right? The whole brand guidelines on Figma, right?
Yeah, the brand guidelines all on Figma, yep. So that's a good example of like Figma is great for so many things. I use it for wireframing. I use it for website design. It's great for app development or app design, Another thing I love about Figma is just like, the ability for developers to have access to everything. So, if dev mode is enabled, you kind of have this view of all of the technical details you might need about the HTML, CSS for different components. You
Could
can
you
see
zoom
all
in
this
on that
stuff.
real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, you can select like an element here. It'll tell you like the padding of that element on the page. It'll show you the border, radius, the margins, flexbox stuff, background colors, filters, anything that's like basically anything that's like the building blocks of that component.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's like every developer's wet dream is to have all this stuff figured out, and it's like the designer is usually not going to be able to tell you that unless they're, super talented and can do both things. So that's a huge, huge part for me.
Yeah.
Another thing that's like super awesome is kind of having these advanced prototyping is just kind of like a huge game changer too. Like being able to build out a design like this, and then being able to link the navigation so that when I present this to a customer, we can actually show them like, okay, here's how the drop down is going to work, and you can see, this is not something that you'd never be able to do in Sketch. I mean, maybe you can now, but having that ability to actually build some of the functionality into the prototype is super, super, super cool.
That is cool. So that it basically is a functioning website at that point, right?
I'd say it's a functioning example of the website. There's still kind of limited on what you can do here. But yeah, you can definitely add some cool like linking of the things. You can even add some kind of like rudimentary transitions, animations and stuff. Some people can get crazy with the interactions. There's a guy who is kind of like building like a side-scrolling Pokemon video game out of Figma using the variables, and it's like
I saw that.
Man, the possibilities are endless. It's like you can literally, if you put your mind to it, you can come up with some crazy ideas with Figma.
So while we're here, would you mind maybe walking us through kind of your process from like a blank Figma project to like your initial, do you start with wireframes in Figma, or is it kind of, what does that kind of process look like?
Yeah, so I guess the very first step is we'll go into a mood board, which we'll use Milanote for. Milanote is like a note-taking software that lets you get pretty granular with like the boards and everything. So we have all of our projects over here. For a specific project, you have all of these cards that you can kind of organize things for the project. So we like to kind of build out like a mood board based on the branding stuff that they gave us. So here we have their content that they provided outlined, their brand colors. We get all of the inspiration that they send us, maybe from their existing site or like catalogs or anything that they have. And then I'll kind of go in my own direction and pick some inspiration from the web that I feel like is a good fit for their brand, and kind of pitch this to them as like, here's what we think that we could, pull together for you guys. Is there anything here that hits home? Is there anything that feels out of place? Let us know how you feel about these, graphics here. And we're kind of trying to get like a visceral idea, because people have a hard time kind of explaining what they like and don't like. So sometimes showing it to them on a board, you can kind of pull that information from them a little bit easier. So getting their inspiration from that, we'll jump into a wireframe. I'll show you an example. So real simple, start with the home page. Always kind of a good starting point to, I always feel like the home page is kind of like your selling, like your number one selling point for the whole website. It's all on the home page. So, we'll start with the hero section, kind of lay out the navigation at the top, Still keeping everything very bare bones at this point,
Could you
depending on what the client, yeah. So like depending on what the client has, we might make this more simple. So this website already had their content kind of figured out. So it was like, we're using the wireframe to kind of frame their content in a way that makes sense. So you can see we're, using text boxes with generic kind of like, not the actual fonts that are going to be on the website, but just kind of getting something on the page to show them like, okay, we'll have an image over here, we'll have a button over here, linking to, the most important thing, like kind of getting that hierarchy figured out. Like, what are the call to actions going to be? What do you want people to do on the website? Like, are you trying to get them to contact you? Are you trying to give them more information? How do you present that information in a way that makes sense? So, laying out all the services here, laying out the locations. Is there a blog? We'll start laying out these different sections to kind of paint the picture of, this is a teaser of all the content that's going to be on the rest of the website. So we have all these buttons kind of spread throughout the homepage to kind of guide people through the actual website. So then once we have the homepage, we'll get their feedback on that. If they like the homepage, we'll go ahead and start cranking out the rest of the pages. This is a pretty lengthy website, so it's like I can't run through everything. But yeah, sometimes it takes a while to get all these wireframes done, but it's it's super, super important. Saves us a bunch of time in the long run because in the past, before worked on some of these bigger clients, we would just run straight into the design process and it would almost always bite us in the ass. So it was kind of a huge step for us to learn how to kind of like take it slow, build out the wireframe. Once we have the wireframe confirmed, obviously we have kind of like a feedback session where we get the client to comment. You can see some of the comments on here from this wireframe stage. They're telling us to use the same header. Figma makes it really easy to kind of have conversations over the comments, so I can ask for clarification if I need to.
Right. On client side, how easy is it for them to go in and make those kind of comments?
Oh, it's super simple. So basically they'll receive the website in a way that kind of looks like this. So this is like a presentation mode where we can use this to share the website. If we're on a screen share, I can walk them through it, or they can log in themselves and see it. There's a comment button up here at the top. So now your cursor turns into a little icon. You can click and just start typing away. There's questions here. And so that'll save that comment in that spot on that artboard, which makes it really easy for me to kind of keep track of how many pages have how many revisions. Makes it really easy to organize things for me, and my workflow is improved greatly from having that. Mm-hmm. I think that another really cool thing, if like say that me and another designer are maybe we're both working on this project together, there's kind of a, if I can show you an example here, it's like, so I have this design open on another tab. You can see my cursor here. So like while I'm logged in and someone else is logged in, we can both be working on the same document together and making changes and like moving things around and like, leaving each other comments like, hey, fix this. And it's real time. So it's like, it's almost like you're in the same room as that person, especially if we're on like a phone call together. It's like, it's like I'm in the office. It's great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, once we get the website high fidelity kind of cranked out, we'll leave them another time to kind of leave more feedback. We get that feedback squared away. Um, Once we get that approval from them, I'm going to pass this document off to the developer, who will then, take all of these fields and images. It's super easy to export images from here. It's like export capabilities in Figma are super great. So, they can kind of save these as different file types, different sizes. Um, Cropping is really easy. So if maybe an image needs to be cropped differently, I can do almost all of that stuff within Figma instead of having to jump to Photoshop or some other app. So super, super fun. I think that Figma has definitely made my job a little bit more um, like fun. I feel like when I was working with Sketch, it was just kind of like you're always fighting against this software to get something done. Whereas when I'm working with Figma, it's just kind of everything just kind of makes sense.
But yeah, thank you for that rundown. I feel like we all have a pretty good idea of what Figma is capable of. And so when you leave those comments for when a client leaves a comment, do you get a notification about it?
Yeah, so we'll get an email notification. It's usually like by per project. It'll kind of wait until there's like some time has gone by, and then it'll kind of send them all at once. So it's like there's been 8 comments. Here they are. Another cool thing is we can link Figma up to our Slack channel for that project. So we actually get notifications into Slack whenever there's a comment made. So, that just makes it so it's even less likely to slip through the cracks, and someone's going to catch it. If I miss the email, someone can see it in the channel and be like, hey, did you fix this? So it's like, you know, having multiple sources of truth makes it really, really convenient to get things done right the first time.
Yeah. So it also has a Slack integration.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one more question before we go, and that was, how did you learn Figma? I remember you mentioned someone named Jesse had had a sort of
Yeah.
got you through the ropes.
Yeah. So when I first started, I was just kind of, you know, doing the crash and burn type of learning where I thought that I knew everything I needed to know from, working in Sketch for so long. So that was like, okay, now applying that to Figma, there's certain things that just don't really vibe with that function, like that workflow. So I think the first kind of stepping stone for me was taking a course on UI UX design, and the guy was Jesse Showalter, and he had a course that was on Skillshare, I think, and it was super super helpful for me to just kind of figure out how to take the things that I was doing in this other software but do them better and more efficiently with Figma. So I think just taking that one course was pivotal in me learning how to move forward in the software and feel more comfortable with it. So I think that if you're ever in a situation where you're trying something new and you might kind of be in that situation where you're kind of scared to fail, taking a course can be a great like inspiration and also kind of give you the confidence to take on some harder challenges.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people try to go at learning new tools with a YouTube Academy approach and just kind of trying to self-teach. Does Figma offer classes themselves, or is it you had to go and find Jesse on your own?
I mean, so YouTube actually has a lot of tutorials by Figma as well. So I would say that YouTube tutorials are also super super helpful because a lot of the like all the new features and everything that gets added in every update, they make a well documented video about it, telling you about everything, the new things that you can do, the new tools. So Figma is really on top of it with YouTube, and they make everything super super easy to digest.
Yeah.
Another YouTube channel, Flux Academy. They're a really great source for Figma education. Like they do all types of tutorials on like, you know, how to build apps out, how to build websites, and they kind of give you that same kind of crash course type education. So big fan of that page too.
That's awesome. Well, this is about the last of my questions I had here. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Anything you wanted to tell the people out there?
No, I mean, I just wanted to, you know, take a moment to talk about, you know, it's like I talked a lot about myself and my job here, but, you know, my job wouldn't be possible without all of my other coworkers on the design team, you know, and the marketing team. Everyone here does a really, really great job in helping each other, lifting each other up. So I'm super grateful that I'm not just, you know, in a company where there's just like one lone designer. And like I have other people that I can kind of bounce ideas off, and we're all so close, and you know, kind of like a design family. It feels nice to have some community there. So props to the Fyresite design team.
Let's go. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you let me talk to you today, Eric. It's been a pleasure. I feel like I learned a lot about Figma, and I look forward to seeing what the next website is. You got any projects coming up?
This last one that I was sharing, you know, it looks like a, you know, medical website. It was the one that we just finished, so that's getting shipped off to development right now. We're working on a website for a modern electric fireplace company. That's probably going to be the next one.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Eric. We'll see you in the next one, and have a fire day.
Hey, there we go.
All right, man.
See you later, bud.
See
Bye.
ya.